Once again, Christian greetings to all our valued listeners and viewers throughout the whole world. Even more particularly to all Shepherd's Rod believers, and most especially to our beloved brothers and sisters in the United States of America. Special greetings to our brethren in Colorado, our brethren in Georgia, our brethren in Kansas, in Missouri, in Texas, in Chicago, Illinois, in California, and also in New York, Fiji Island, Mexico, Spain, Portugal, Africa, Kenya, Zambia, Pakistan, to the United Kingdom, to our brethren in Australia, and also to our brethren in Malaysia, and to the rest of the 144,000 living saints scattered abroad. Greetings. May the good Lord bless you, brothers and sisters. This is our special episode number 11 on the subject, the 66 books in the heavenly sanctuary. And I would like to repeat again that according to track number 3 on page 6, it says, and since the books are obviously the focal point in the scene, the question naturally arises, what is the reason for books? So what is the focal point of the judicial proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary? It is the books. And in 2SR 187, it says, the true worshippers in the earthly who by faith, look forward to the administration of the heavenly were credited in the books of heaven as worthy of life eternal. 2SR page 187, it says, were credited in the books of heaven, by which such books deals with all aspects of life. White House Recruiter page 20, that heaven's books deal with all aspects of life. And the very first aspect of the judgment is bookwork. Answerer number 5, page 30. This is the first aspect of the judgment, and being only a bookwork, a work that does not disturb either the dead in the graves or the living in the church, it takes place in heaven. And we know that that is the only cleansing pertaining to the sanctuary service. According to track number 3, page 50, as the cleansing of the heavenly sanctuary is a work of cleansing the books. So, the cleansing that takes place in the heavenly sanctuary is cleansing the books, inscribed in plural form. And the only books to be cleansed in the heavenly sanctuary is the Lamb's books. Track number 3, page 7. That not every name that has been entered into the Lamb's books will be retained there. So, the only books to be cleansed in the heavenly sanctuary is the Lamb's books. And such cleansing is blotting out all the names by which they failed to endure unto the end. Let's read again, track number 3, page 7. Accordingly, the books contain the names of a mixed multitude. But those who stood firmly in the faith and continued patiently to the end, and those who did not, said Christ, he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. Matthew 24, verse 13. But those who do not endure shall be lost. Track number 3, page 7. So, if our names will be blotted out in the Lamb's Book of Life, indicate that we are forever lost. But if our names will be retained in the Lamb's Book of Life, plainly indicating that our destiny is life eternal. Now, I will no longer focus at this time how our names to be retained and how our names will be blotted out, for we explain it several times. We will be focusing to the chronological order of events, how the work, the judicial work in the heavenly sanctuary are thus performed as stated in the Shepherd's Rod publications. Now, I would like to connect our subject on track number 5 on page 109. It says, track number 5, 109. The investigative judgment of the dead consequently takes place in the heavenly temple only, whereas the investigative judgment of the living takes place in the heavenly as well as in the earthly temple. While the records are being made up for the books in the heavenly, the people are being investigated for the separation in the earthly. Matthew 22, verse 11 to 13. See Malachi 3, verse 1 to 3. And as the measuring is figurative of the same work, then it leads to the conclusion that the temple, the altar, and them that worship therein must figuratively represent the three classes to be judged. Now, here, brothers and sisters, we can easily discern that there are only three classes to undergo such judicial proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary. And who are they? They are the temple, the altar, and the worshipers. So the proceedings that takes place in the heavenly sanctuary were clustered by God into three groups: temple, altar, worshipers. Now let us continue reading in tract number 5, page 109. It says, the temple and the altar, inanimate objects, must characterize two classes of inanimate saints. The two classes of dead saints. An altar, moreover, obviously cannot be installed in a temple before the temple is built. And furthermore, in size, it is comparatively much smaller than a temple. Naturally then, it must be symbolized, a class of saints, which not only comes after those who are characterized by the temple, but which also is proportionately much smaller. Thus the temple, the first and the largest object, must represent the first and largest body of righteous dead, those from Adam's time to the beginning of the judgment in 1844. While the altar, a spatial and smaller object, must represent a spatial and smaller body of righteous dead, the righteous who die from 1844 on and who are to come up in the spatial resurrection. Daniel 12 verse 2, Early Writings, page 285. Those who worship therein, being the living saints, are to be measured. They can only be the 144,000. Those whom the denomination was, since 1844, to gather in for translation. Tract number 5, 109 and 110. Now, let us ponder deeply, brothers and sisters. Here the shepherd's rod plainly told us that there is a group of people by which God commanded that they will no longer be measured. As stated in Revelation 11 verse 2. So let us read now Revelation 11 verse 2 in tract number 5, 110. It says, but the court which is without the temple, leave out and measure it not. For it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread underfoot 42 months. Then it says, but why leave out the court? Why not measure it also? For since it is a part of the building, it too must be symbolical of saints. Obviously, because it represents the great multitude which no man could number, meaning measure, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues. Revelation 7 verse 9. The last who come from among the Gentiles. The court, in other words, is symbolical of the immeasurable, innumerable harvest of second fruits brought in after the measurable, numerable harvest of first fruits, the 144,000. It is not measured, meaning investigated, because it represents those among whom there are no bad to be cast out, for they are gathered in after the cleansing of the heavenly temple, Daniel 8 verse 14, after the judgment of the dead, after the separation of the bad from among the good in the church, as illustrated by the parable of the net, Matthew 13 verse 47 and 48. They are those who by name, my people, Revelation 18 verse 4, are called to come out of Babylon, and who, with no unclean among them, Isaiah 52 verse 1, come into the already purified and living church of God. Track number 5, page 110 and page 111. So, let us carefully decipher this wonderful prophecy. First, accordingly, there are only 3 classes to be judged in the judicial proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary: temple, altar, worshipers. But the worshipers outside the temple, but within the court, pointing to the great multitude which no man could number, the divine command is that measure it not. So that is very plain. What does it mean by the word measure? Investigate. They will no longer be investigated. The great multitude which no man could number. Now, I would like to read the great controversy. The Great Controversy, page 485. The Great Controversy, page 485. It says, I would like to focus to the statement. It is impossible that the sins of men should be blotted out until after the judgment at which their cases are to be investigated. The Great Controversy, page 485. It is impossible that the sins of men will be blotted out without passing first such investigation. And it was quoted in 2SR 187. It says, 2SR 187 and 188, says the Spirit of God, it is impossible that the sins of men should be blotted out until after the judgment, at which time their cases are to be investigated. 2SR 187 and 188. So that reading is very plain, that there is no such sins committed by the righteous that it will be blotted out without passing first investigation. And for sure, the great multitude, which no man could number, their sins must be blotted out. And that investigation, the blotting out of sins, is or such proceedings must be in the most holy place. So I would like to read the statement. 2SR 189. During Christ's ministration in the holiest of all, which is a throne of judgment, of blotting out sins, and granting of rewards. So the proceedings to take place in the most holy place is blotting out of sins. Obviously, therefore, we can easily understand, brothers and sisters, that the great multitude will pass the investigation in the most holy place. Otherwise, their sins can never be blotted out. Obviously, therefore, the divine command by which the great multitude will no longer pass the investigation is not in the most holy place, but rather in the holy place. What is the investigation in the holy place? Blotting out of names. The investigation in the holy place is blotting out of names. Why is it that the great multitude will no longer pass the investigation in the holy place? It is because at the time when the message goes to the great multitude, which no man could number, there will be no more wicked. There will be no more tares. There will be no more bad fish that will be converted and joined to the church. And the shepherd's rod is very plain, brothers and sisters. Saying in track number 5 on page 110, it says, let's read, for they are gathered in after the cleansing of the heavenly temple. Now, brothers and sisters, it says, for they are gathered in after the cleansing of the heavenly temple. Gathered where? In the holy place. The great multitude must be gathered first in the holy place before they will be brought into the most holy place. But when does the great multitude will be gathered into the holy place? After the cleansing of the heavenly temple. So we need now to study closely, when does the cleansing of the heavenly temple is completely finished, brothers and sisters. Remember, the cleansing of the heavenly temple is directly pointing to the holy place. Because when the great multitude will be gathered in, it is after the cleansing of the heavenly temple and before their sins were blotted out. So the blotting out of sins in reality is not the direct application of the cleansing of the heavenly sanctuary. In 1 TG number 11, I would like to read this statement. 1 TG number 11 on page. Let us go back first to track number 3. Track number 3, page 50 and 51. As the cleansing of the heavenly sanctuary is a work of cleansing the books by blotting from them the names of both the backslider and the tares. So that is the cleansing of the heavenly sanctuary is a work of cleansing the books. And we will be focusing our whole attention to that predicted event, the last and the final day of atonement. The statement in track number 3 on page 73 and page 74. It says, being the day of atonement in type for both the dead and the living, this service of the earthly tabernacle therefore projects the day of atonement in its type, the cleansing of the sanctuary in heaven from unworthy names in the books, and the cleansing of the church on earth from its unconverted and unstable members, thus bringing the time of clean books. So let us focus first our attention to that predicted event, thus bringing the time of clean books. And the only books to be cleansed in the heavenly sanctuary is the Lamb's Book of Life. The Lamb's Book of Life, not sealed with 7 seals. So hoping that the more we proceed, the more it will become clearer and clearer. Now, the shepherd's rod is very plain, stating the absolute fact that on that last final day of atonement, after that final day of atonement, in the holy place, when all the names of the wicked are completely blotted out, then bringing the time of clean books. Now, let us enumerate one by one again. There are only 3 classes. There are only 3 classes to be judged in the holy place. And who are they according to the shepherd's rod? As stated in the Bible, they are the temple, the altar, and the third one, the worshipers. Who are they? The temple? Those who died from Adam up to 1844. And who are they? They are the first 5 seals. Who are they? The altar? They are those who died under the third angel's message, and they are the 6th seal, the last seal under the judgment that pertains to the dead. And who are they? The worshipers? The 144,000 living saints. So in this study, the proceedings in the holy place was clustered by God into 3 groups. The proceedings that pertains to the temple, the proceedings that pertains to the altar, the proceedings that pertains to the worshipers. And since it is consecutive order, the proceedings of the altar, which is the sixth seal, cannot begin not until the proceedings or the entire proceedings pertains to the temple is finished. The same with the proceedings of the 144,000 or the worshippers. It will not begin not until the proceedings that pertains to the altar, which is the sixth seal, is finished. And they are the last group of people to be judged in the holy place. So that is very plain, brothers and sisters. So the worshippers, they are the very last group of people to be judged in the holy place. So of course, our whole attention must be to the last one, the worshippers, which is the congregation of the living. After the investigation of the congregation of the dead is finished, then commence the congregation of the living, by which it was predicted beforehand that the only names that will be retained in the Lamb's books of life among the congregation of the living is the 144,000 living saints, spiritual Israel. Now, I would like to go back again to the reading. In track number 5, page 110, it says, since we already read the entire paragraph, I will only pick up the portion saying, for they are gathered in after the cleansing of the heavenly temple. Who are gathered in after the cleansing of the heavenly temple? The great multitude which no man could number. So, I would like to repeat again. Who are they to be gathered in after the cleansing of the heavenly temple? They are the great multitude which no man could number. Where is the place that they will be gathered in? Holy place. So the term gathered in, when it pertains to the heavenly sanctuary, gathered in to the Lamb's book of life, by which that Lamb's book of life are already completely cleansed. And from the time that it was cleansed, brothers and sisters, it will no longer be polluted again, according to the Bible and according to the shepherd's rod. Who are they, the great multitude? They are the living saints to be gathered from all nations, to be gathered from all nations. In this study, both the living saints and the resurrected saints, there are only two classes. Those that had been gathered from all nations and those that had been gathered from many nations. So I would like to show to you, brothers and sisters, the simple illustration. So, worshipers, 144,000 from many nations. Then, great multitude, Revelation 7:9, from all nations. So here, brothers and sisters, this illustration is the same with the resurrected saints. The temple it was taken from all nations, and the altar from many nations. From many nations. Now, let us focus first to the altar. From many nations. Let us read again track number 5. Track number 5, 110. Track number 5, 110. While the altar, a special and smaller object, must represent a special and smaller body of righteous dead, the righteous who die from 1844 on, and who are to come up in the special resurrection of Daniel 12:2, early writings, page 285. When does the commencement of the gathering of the altar? 1844. So the gathering of the gathering of the altar commenced in 1844. And they were taken out from many nations. Because there are only two classes of redeemed. All nations, many nations. And logically, the all nations must be bigger than the many nations. The same with the temple, it must be bigger than the altar. So the temple, from Adam to 1844, those who died under the first 5 seals, they were taken out from all nations. Whereas the altar, they were taken out only from many nations, not all nations. Now, let us read again the statement. In track number 5. So, Track number 5, page 108. Track number 5, page 108, it says, thus the doctrine of the investigative judgment, along with the doctrine of ingathering and numbering the 144,000, comprises the present truth committed to the Seventh-day Adventist denomination in 1844. What is the message committed by God to the Seventh-day Adventist Church? The gathering or the doctrine of ingathering of the 144,000 and the doctrine of the numbering of the 144,000. Brothers and sisters, which is pointing to the investigative judgment. It says, thus the doctrine of the investigative judgment, along with the doctrine of ingathering and numbering the 144,000. So, investigative judgment. But what judgment? Analyze closely. What judgment by which committed by God to the Seventh-day Adventist Church? Now let us read General Conference Special, page 39. Let's read the statement. General Conference Special, page 39. The judgment for the dead, furthermore, is not the message of the great and dreadful day. It does not even touch on the prophecies of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And since the one by whom the message of the judgment for the dead has unfolded has already been dead this many years, and we know that that is pointing to Sister White. The only message that was ever committed by God to Sister White is only the judgment that pertains to the dead. And it does not even touch the message concerning the judgment that pertains to the living. Now, why is it that the very first vision that was given by God to Sister White in 1844 is concerning the 144,000? So, we need to study closely, brothers and sisters, this very important prophecy. We need to have a complete understanding from 1844 up to this present year, 2021. Now, I would like to read again track number 5. On page 110, it says, those who worship therein, being the living saints, who are to be measured. So the living saints are to be measured. But not only the living saints, but as well as the temple and the altar. It says, those who worship therein, being the living saints, who are to be measured, they can only be the 144,000. Those whom the denomination was, since 1844, to gather in for translation. To gather in for what? For translation. Now, here we need now to study closely concerning the books in the heavenly sanctuary. There is a book which is called the Book of Resurrection, and there is a book which is called the Book of Translation. Of course, brothers and sisters, there are only 6 seals to be resurrected. And only the saints under the 7th seal that will be translated to heaven without seeing death. But we need to look at the type before we could focus our attention to the antitype. We need to look at first the type. Who are they, the type? To be gathered in the book of translation. And when they had been gathered in, now I would like to read track number 3. Track number 3 on page 79 and page 80. Track number 3, page 79 and page 80. Before reading track number 3, page 79 and 80, I would like to read first track number 5, page 74. So let's read, brothers and sisters. Track number 5, page 74. It says, it will be noted, track number 5, page 74. It will be noted that the 144,000 are called the first fruits, denoting that they are sealed at the beginning of the harvest. You see? Denoting that they are sealed at the beginning of the harvest. The commencement of the time to separate the tares from the wheat. To the parable of the harvest, then we must go for the full explanation of the 5 months period. And then it says, in track number 3, the harvest, the time from the baptism of Christ to the close of provision is shown to be illustrated by 12 figurative months, 6 from Christ's baptism to his crucifixion, 5 from the crucifixion to the ingathering of the first fruits, the 144,000, Revelation 14:4, leaving 1 month for the ingathering of the second fruits, the great multitude, Revelation 7, verse 9. Now, let us connect that statement in track number 5, page 74, in track number 5, 110. Now, first of all, track number 5, page 74, plainly told us that in order for us to fully comprehend the subject, the 5 figurative months, we need to have better understanding concerning the subject, the harvest. And according to that reading in track number 5, page 74, it is track number 3, especially mentioned. The track that focus to the subject, the harvest. Now, I would like to read again that statement saying, leaving 1 month for the ingathering of the second fruits, the great multitude. Revelation 7 verse 9. Track number 5, page 74. Leaving 1 month for the ingathering of the sacred fruits, the great multitude, which no man could number. Now, if I will ask a question, when does the great multitude, Revelation 7 verse 9, be gathered in? The absolute answer is found in track number 5, 110. For they are gathered in after the cleansing of the heavenly temple. So that statement in track number 5, page 74, must perfectly corroborates to the statement, for they are gathered in after the cleansing of the heavenly temple, leaving 1 month for the ingathering of the great multitude, leaving 1 parabolical month. When does the commencement of the ingathering of the great multitude? After the cleansing of the heavenly temple. Therefore, we can easily understand that 1 parabolical month is the given clue of such tremendous event. Brothers and sisters, cleansing of the heavenly temple. After that 1 parabolical month is ended, then the heavenly sanctuary is cleansed. Then the gathering of the great multitude will then begin after the cleansing of the heavenly temple. Now, let us go back first to the statement in track number 5, page 74, pointing to the worshipers. Who are they, the worshipers? The 144,000 living saints. Track number 5, 110. Now, let us read again the statement. Track number 5, page 74. It says, it will be noted that the 144,000 are called the first fruits, denoting that they are sealed at the beginning of the harvest. When does the 144,000 living saints are to be sealed? At the beginning of the harvest. Now, we need now to connect to the subject, the harvest. And then it says, the commencement of the time to separate the tares from the wheat. Then it says, to the parable of the harvest. Then we must go for the full explanation of the 5 months period. You want to know the full explanation of the 5 months period? Then study closely the subject of the harvest. And we need to study first the type so that we could understand the antitype. In the judicial proceedings that pertains to the dead, only the heavenly sanctuary is affected. But in the judicial proceedings that pertains to the living, both sanctuary are thus affected, heavenly as well as the earthly. Right? That is the statement, track number 5, page 109. Now, I would like to read to you again track number 3, page 79 and page 80. It says, track number 3, page 79 and page 80. It says, but as those who arose with Christ, ascended with him as trophies of his victory over death and the grave, they thereby became a living type, and thus the waveship of the living. Who are they? The living type. Brothers and sisters, they are those that had been resurrected on the first advent of Jesus Christ. If you want to have a full understanding concerning such subject, I would invite you to fully watch our special episode video concerning the waveship, the subject concerning the waveship. But at this time, I would like to focus our attention to the cleansing of the sanctuary. And it is revealed by God through the subject of the gathering, both to the 144,000 living saints and the great multitude. So, one truth dovetailing another. Track number 5, page 38. Or, one thing proves another to SR 255. So, as a whole, all the inspired records are in perfect harmony. Now, why is it that God showed to Sister White? The very first vision of Sister White is the gathering of the 144,000. Of course, it cannot be applied to the 144,000 living saints, spiritual Israel, the antitype. For in 1844, they were not yet even born. They were not yet in existence. But there must be an absolute significance why God showed to Sister White on her very first vision after the disappointment is concerning the gathering of the 144,000 living saints. Now, brothers and sisters, who are they that had been gathered since 1844? it is not the 144,000 living saints. It is the altar, according to track number 5, 110. Who are they, the altar? The sixth seal. All of them who died under the fate of the third angel's message. Track number 5, 110. Why is it that God showed to Sister White the gathering of the 144,000? Because the gathering of the sixth seal is the type. And the gathering of the 144,000 is the antitype. What is the type and the antitype? Altar and worshipers, both of them are taken only from many nations. Not from all nations, only from many nations. So the constituent of the altar are taken out only from many nations. The divine commission given by God to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, plainly indicating that all the saved ones under the sixth seal are only taken out from many nations. Now, as I've said, brothers and sisters, this portion will be more discussed in details on the subject, the wave shape and the wave lobes. Now, I would like to read again the statement on the desire of ages, saying on page 77, all the ceremonies of the feast are types of the work of Christ. Where? In the heavenly sanctuary. So to understand the occurrence on the earthly sanctuary is to understand the occurrence, the proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary. As also stated in track number 5, let's read the statement. Here in track number 5 on page 3. Track number 3, page 13. It says, since earthly beings, track number 3 on page 13. Since earthly beings themselves, having never been in heaven, are naturally strangers to heaven's realities. 1 Corinthians chapter 2 verse 9. Then in order for God to make heavenly truth known unto them, He must reveal it by means of earthly realities with which they are familiar. Hence, through the sanctuary work on earth is seen the sanctuary work in heaven. You see? Hence, through the sanctuary work on earth is seen the sanctuary work in heaven. Hebrews chapter 9, verses 1 to 9. Indeed, the sanctuary above, being the pattern of the one below, The services of the former are therefore definitely revealed in the services of the latter. Track number 3, page 13. Now let us focus first to the services in the former, which is the type. Let us read track number 3. It says here, track number 3, on page 76, it says, here we see commanded the observance of 3 harvest rites. So there are 3 harvest rites or ritual. Number 1, the ceremony of the wave sheaf at the beginning of the first harvest. What is the ceremony at the beginning of the first harvest? The ceremony of the wave sheaf. Second, the ceremony of the wave loaves at the close of the first harvest. So what is the ceremony that the first harvest is closed? The ceremony of the wave loaves. And third, the Feast of Tabernacles at the close of the second harvest. Then it says, being typical, these 2-grained harvest. What is the 2-grained? Wheat and barley. Or barley and wheat. Being typical, these 2-grained harvest with their 3 literal sacraments accordingly foreshadow 2 souls harvest with 3 spiritual rites, the first of which is the first fruits with wave sheaf and wave loaves. Brothers and sisters, you cannot read the statement. First fruits. You cannot read the statement. Second fruits with wave sheaf and wave loaves. But only the first fruits. So, how does the shepherd's rod explain the word with? Brothers and sisters, it says first fruits with wave sheaf and wave loaves. I would like to read first track number 3, page 83. Track number 3, page 83. And it says, and by the same token of logic, the wave sheaf and the wave loaves must have a double application, each to the dead and to the living, together comprising the total fruits of the antitypical harvest. So the wave sheaf and the wave loaves must have a double application, each to the dead and to the living. But only with first fruits. Because concerning the second fruits, it says in track number 3, page 80, the second fruits and the Feast of Tabernacles. what feast attached to the second fruits? The Feast of Tabernacles. But concerning the first fruits, only wave sheep and wave loaves. When does the wave sheep will be offered? During the Passover week. The wave loaves, during the Pentecost. So the subject that pertains to the first fruits is only Passover and Pentecost. Brothers and sisters, that is pointing to the Passover and the Pentecost. But where is the particular place pointing to Passover and Pentecost? Of course, it must be pointing to the occurrence on earth. Because the only occurrence that pertains to the heavenly sanctuary, the focal point is the Day of Atonement. There is no Day of Atonement on the earthly sanctuary in the priesthood of Jesus Christ. The only Day of Atonement is in the heavenly sanctuary, which is either blotting out of names or either blotting out of sins. Now, let us focus to what is the first harvest rite, or called ritual or ceremony, which pertains to the wave sheep, by which it says in tract number 3, page 76, the ceremony of the wave sheep at the beginning of the first harvest. So let us focus to the ceremony of the wave sheep at the beginning of the first harvest. Now, let us read the statement in tract number 3, page 78. The wave sheep was to be offered on the morrow after the Sabbath, that is on the first day of the week, now commonly called Sunday. This offering was to be presented not on a special day of the month, but rather on a special day of the week, before the sickle was put to the grain and gathered into sheaves. Leviticus 23, verse 11 and verse 14. So, the shepherd's rod made it so plain, as stated in the Bible in Leviticus 23, verse 11, 14, that they were not permitted to gather, brothers and sisters, the first harvest, not until they could offer the wave sheep offering. Brothers and sisters, after the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And we know that the first feast occurred on April 15. And in this study, it is very important to understand that there are 7 patterns of Bible calendar. Jesus Christ, according to the shepherd's rod, according to the writings of Sister White, according to the Bible, was resurrected on the very day by which the worship will be offered in the presence of God. So, let us read tract number 3, page 78 and 79. It says, coming just at the right time, in the season of the first fruits, the Passover week was the period in which the wave sheep was usually offered before the Lord, its ritual prophetically projecting Christ, the antitype of the wave sheep. For more than 1,000 years, the annual waving of the sheep pointing forward to its antitypical event, the resurrection of Christ. And as Christ arose on the very day that the wave sheep was to be offered, the day after the Sabbath, let no one attribute the singular concurrence of these two events on that day to mere coincidence or to any cause other than divine design. He was the antitype of the wave sheep, declares the spirit of prophecy, and his resurrection took place on the very day when the wave sheep was to be presented before the Lord. Desire of Ages, page 785. When was Jesus Christ was resurrected? He was resurrected on April 18, Sunday, the very day by which the wave sheep is to be offered in the presence of the Lord in that year, 31 AD. Brothers and sisters, in what day in the Passover week by which Jesus Christ was offered? According to the shepherd's rod, it is in the 4th day of the feast. Let's read the statement on the Old Symbolic Code. 3 Symbolic Code, 8 to 10, page 11. If we will be familiar, brothers and sisters, in this study, you can easily discern and recognize that this coming Day of Atonement is the last and the final Day of Atonement. Among the congregation of the living. Now let us read 3 Symbolic Code, 8 to 10, page 11. It says, now the only disagreement between the shepherd's rod and the Desire of Ages on this subject is that the Desire of Ages says that on the 2nd day of the feast, the first fruits of the year's harvest, a sheaf of barley, was presented before the Lord. The Desire of Ages, page 77, which places the first feast of the Passover on the Sabbath. Numbers 28 verse 17, thus making the slaying of the lamb on the 14th day, Exodus 12 verse 6, fall on Friday. Whereas the shepherd's rod places the slaying of the lamb on the 14th day on Wednesday, the first feast on Thursday, the second feast on Friday, and so on. Therefore, in view of the fact that the shepherd's rod and the Desire of Ages are here at variance, and that we believe both to be inspired, we must necessarily go to the Bible to prove which is the correct day and how to harmonize the two volumes. Now, this is my honest question. Does the shepherd's rod and the writings of Sister White are at variance or in disagreement? The absolute answer must be no. Since both writings are inspired by the same spirit of inspiration, there is no possibility that they will contradict each other. In the days of B.T. Hotep, the statement, the shepherd's rod and the Desire of Ages are at variance, not in reality, but only in understanding. It seems it was in disagreement. But the thing is that both of them must be correct. And since the shepherd's rod is very clear that Jesus Christ was resurrected on the 4th day of the feast, by which April 14 in 31 AD fall on Wednesday. I would like to show to you. So, this is 31 AD. 31 AD. It is also stated word for word in the Great Controversy 327. April. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And B.T. Hotep says that on that year, 14 fall on Wednesday. Then it is 15, 16, 17. Then this is 18. Now let us 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, then 3, then 2, then 1. B.T. Hotep made it so plain that Jesus Christ was resurrected on Sunday, the 4th day of the feast. This is the first day, second, third. Then this is the 4th day. Just project 31 AD, April pattern number 6. So this April 14 is called the Passover day. Then the commencement of the Passover week commences on 15. But the vision that was shown to Sister White is not the same, because it is on the second day of the feast that the wave ship is offered. So the vision that was shown by God to Sister White is not pointing to the resurrection of Jesus Christ. It must be another event. Because the resurrection of Jesus Christ Jesus Christ was resurrected on the fourth day of the feast, not on the second day. And the shepherd's rod made it so plain that if the wave ship will be offered on the second day of the feast, then this is the arrangement of the calendar: Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So it must be, Saturday must be 15. Then 16, Sunday. This is the second day of the feast. Second day. And that is pattern number 2. Then we have 14, then backward. Therefore, the vision of Sister White is pointing to Bible pattern calendar, pattern number 2, whereas the crucifixion of Jesus Christ and the resurrection of Jesus Christ is Bible calendar, pattern number 6. So we have pattern number 6 and pattern number 2. And brothers and sisters, there is no possibility that you could comprehend this very important subject unless the Bible creation calendar must be restored first. Because the key word in this study is the Bible pattern calendar. And there are only 7 patterns because there are only 7 days in 1 week. Let us project first the 7 patterns of Bible calendar. These are the 7 patterns of the Bible calendar. From pattern number 1 to pattern number 7. You see, brothers and sisters, pattern number 1, April 1, fall on Wednesday. Pattern number 2, April 1, fall on Saturday. Pattern number 3, April 1, fall on Tuesday. Pattern number 4, April 1, falls on Friday. Pattern number 5, April 1, fall on Monday. Pattern number 6, April 1, fall on Thursday. Pattern number 7, April 1, fall on Sunday. Then, go back to the same pattern, brothers and sisters, after the 7-year cycle. So, there are only 7 years cycle. Then go back to pattern number 1. Then another 7 years. Then go back to pattern number 1. Now, I would like to read again patriarchs and prophets. 539. Patriarchs and Prophets 539. It says, the Passover was followed by the 7 days feast of unleavened bread. The first and the 7th day were days of holy convocation, with no servile work was to be performed. On the 2nd day of the feast, the first fruits of the year's harvest were presented before God. Barley was the earliest grain in Palestine, and at the opening of the feast it was beginning to ripen. A sheaf of this grain was waved by the priest before the altar of God as an acknowledgement that all was his. Not until this ceremony had been performed was the harvest to be gathered. Do not forget the statement in track number 3, page 76, that worship, such ritual, is pointing only to the first fruits. And such ritual indicates the beginning of the first harvest. According to that reading in track number 3, page 76, there is no ritual pertaining to the worship that pointing to the second fruits. Second fruits is only the Feast of Tabernacles. Or at least there are only 3 feasts that pointing to the great multitude. Feast of Trumpets, Day of Atonement, and the Feast of Tabernacles. But concerning the first fruits, it must be Passover, by which the worship will be offered, Pentecost, and Day of Atonement. These 3 feasts must be pointing only to the first fruits. So we need to focus our attention to the first fruits first. And of course, our subject is concerning to the 144,000 living saints, the focal point of our subject, where we could find all the ceremonies of the feast in the tithe. That is in the book of Leviticus. How many chapters the book of Leviticus? 27 chapters. How many books in the New Testament? 27. Because the gospel, let's read. Volume 6, page 392. The gospel is given in precept in Leviticus. I would like to read again. Volume 6, page 392. The gospel is given in precept in Leviticus. Now, where we could find that statement that on the second day of the feast, the worship will be offered in the presence of God. Now, first of all, we need to go back to patriarchs and prophets. Let's read 537. The annual feast. So I would like to read to you. Patriarchs and Prophets 537. It says, the annual feast, plural form. Let us read the first paragraph. There were 3 annual assemblies of all Israel for worship at the sanctuary. Exodus 23, verse 14 to 16. Shiloh was for a time the place of these gatherings, but Jerusalem afterward became the center of the nation's worship, and here the tribes convened for the solemn feast. So the solemn feast is pointing to the annual assemblies. So that is very plain. Right? solemn feast. In answerer number 3, do not forget the gospel. In Nahum 1 verse 15, keep thy solemn feast. Let me ask all the Bidian, does Nahum 1 verse 15 applied in the Old Testament or in the last generation of men? Try to review the Bible, writings of Sister White and Betty Hodder. And there is no other solemn feast recorded in the Bible, recorded in the writings of Sister White and the Shepherd's Rod publication, except the Holy Feast, the annual feast. All the Bidians, they have annual feast. Because I am a member of Mountain Dale and Waco before, we have our annual feast. But our annual feast, is pagan, unholy feast. We gathered on December or whatever dates that we choose. It was chosen by us. It was chosen by men, not divinely appointed. The same with the Sunday keeper. Yes, they have a weekly Sabbath, but they choose their own weekly Sabbath Sunday. The same with the Davidian. They have their yearly Sabbath, yearly gatherings, but the fact is that it is unholy. Because the opposite of holy feast is unholy. And God will surprise them with their unholy feast. Right? That is the vision that was shown by God to Sister White. In volume 5, page 690. I think there's a statement in the Old Symbolic Code concerning the unholy feast. So, we need to ponder deeply, brothers and sisters. The same with Sunday, that is unholy. Unholy weekly Sabbath, because the only holy weekly Sabbath is the one appointed by God, and it is on the 7th day of the week, and that is Saturday. But Christians choose their own weekly Sabbath, not appointed by God, not given by God. So the only appointed holy feast, brothers and sisters, is the feast given in the Bible, the solemn feast. Look at the statement here in Patriarchs and Prophets 537. It says, there were 3 annual assemblies of all Israel for worship at the sanctuary. Why is it that we observe weekly Sabbath? Because that is the divinely appointed weekly Sabbath Saturday to ancient Israel. And would you think God gave another yearly Sabbaths to modern Israel? It cannot be proven. Because the apostles, in 54 AD, they still observe the Holy Feast. And it is concerning Passover, Pentecost, as mentioned in Acts of the Apostles 389, 390, and 391. Although, that is not my subject at this time. Because I want to prove to you that in all angles of the prophecy, we can concretely build the absolute fact that this coming Day of Atonement is the last and the final Day of Atonement. Now, I would like to read again the statement. Patriarchs and Prophets 537. There were 3 annual assemblies of all Israel for worship at the sanctuary. Exodus 23 verse 14 and 16. Shiloh was for a time the place of these gatherings, but Jerusalem afterward became the center of the nation's worship. And here the tribes convened for the solemn feast. You see, solemn feast. Then I would like to read the statement in the bottom. This chapter is based on Leviticus 23. So the statement in Patriarchs and Prophets 539 is based on Leviticus 23. Now let us read the Bible. Leviticus 23. So let us read, brethren. Leviticus chapter 23. So it says here, Leviticus 23 verse 9, 10, 11, and 12. Verse 9, And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye become into the land which I gave unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, and they shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest. Leviticus 23 verse 10 is a prophecy. When ye become into the land, when ye entered into the land, and then it says, and ye shall wave the sheep before the Lord to be accepted for you. On the morrow, after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. So the Bible is very plain that Leviticus 23, verse 9, 10, and 11, and 12, it is a prediction when they will come into the land, in the border of the promised land. And the prediction is perfect. Now let us read Patriarchs and Prophets. Let us read the statement given by the voice of inspiration. Patriarchs and Prophets. So it says here, the voice of inspiration is very plain. In such historical event, brethren, that because of the rebellion at Kadesh, they were not, let me read to you, 406 in Patriarchs and Prophets. During these years, the people were constantly reminded that they were under the divine rebuke. In the revelation at Kadesh, they had rejected God. And God for the time rejected them. You see, brothers and sisters? And we know that brothers and sisters, so I would like to read to you the statement. Patriarchs and Prophets, page 406. During these years, the people were constantly reminded that they were under the divine rebuke. In the revelation at Kadesh, they had rejected God, and God had for the time rejected them, since they had proved unfaithful to His covenant. They were not to receive the sign of the covenant, the rite of circumcision. Their design to return to the land of slavery had shown them to be unworthy of freedom, and the ordinance of the Passover instituted to commemorate the deliverance from bondage was not to be observed. You see the historical event? I would like to show to you the simple historical event. According to the shepherd's rod, in 1 SR 115, 116, they came out from Egypt 1491 BC. Then they celebrated the Passover on the wilderness in 1490 BC. And this one is pattern number 4. This one is pattern number 5. Then in 1489 BC. And this one is pattern number 6. They celebrated the Passover under the leadership of Moses while in Egypt. And then they celebrated the Passover in the wilderness in the leadership of Moses only in 1490 BC, pattern number 5, and then 1489 BC, pattern number 6. But in 1488 BC, they were no longer permitted to observe the ordinance of the Passover because of their rebellion against God. The ordinance of the Passover, according to the voice of inspiration, it was suspended. When it was restored again, that they were commanded by God to observe the Passover. Now let us read Patriarchs and Prophets 485. Patriarchs and Prophets 485 and also 613. So we have two passages. 485. A short distance from Jordan, the Hebrews made their first encampment in Canaan. Here Joshua circumcised the children of Israel, and the children of Israel encamped in Gilgal and keep the Passover. Keep the Passover, the suspension of the rite of circumcision, since the rebellion at Kadesh had been a constant witness to Israel that their covenant with God, of which it was the appointed symbol, had been broken. And the discontinuance of the Passover, the memorial of their deliverance from Egypt, had been an evidence of the Lord's displeasure at their desire to return to the land of bondage. In 613, in Patriarchs and Prophets, it says, Gilgal had been the place of Israel's first encampment in the Promised Land. It was here that Joshua, by divine direction, set up the pillar of 12 stones to commemorate the miraculous passage of the Jordan. Here circumcision had been renewed. Here they had kept the first Passover after the sin at Kadesh and the desert sojourn. And the absolute fact is that was on the second day of the feast. So what Leviticus declared, Leviticus 23, verse 9, 10, and 11, predicted beforehand that when the ordinance of the Passover will be instituted again, it must be on the second day of the feast. By which such event, brethren, is typological, pointing to the last section of the second Exodus under the leadership of Joshua. And we are rest assured, brethren, that this is the very year, because this year is pattern number 2. There will be no other year, brothers and sisters, to fulfill the event, to fulfill the prophecy, except this year. For if this year is not the fulfillment of the prophecy, since the Bible calendar, there are 7 cycles, brothers and sisters, 2022, Bible calendar, this is pattern number 2. Pattern number 2. Therefore, 2023, pattern number 3. 2024, pattern number 4. 2025, pattern number 5. 2026, pattern number 6. 2027, pattern number 7. 2028, pattern number 1. 2029, pattern number 2. The prophecy is very clear that the sealing of the 144,000 first fruits, there must be ritual. And what is that ritual? The offering of the wave sheep. When would be it will be offered? Second day of the feast. What Bible pattern calendar? Pattern number 2. Now this year is pattern number 2. If this is not the fulfillment of the prophecy, then it must be 2029. But the fact is, 2029 is already the end part of the scarlet colored beast. That is already general clause of provision. So it is revealed in type and antitype. When does the scarlet colored beast commence? 1929. How many years that the scarlet colored beast will reign? 100 years according to the shepherd's rod. 1929 plus 100, that is 2029. Brethren, I would like to repeat again. In all angles, in different angles, and not only different, but all angle of the prophecy, we can prove that this year is the last and the final day of atonement. How many angles given in the Bible, in the shepherd's rod? I would like to enumerate one by one. One is our pocket edition, page 37, that the Bible reveals its tremendous truths in diverse ways. First, in numerics. In numerics, we can prove to you that this year is the only year that will fulfill the prophecy concerning the sealing of the 144,000, both in the heavenly and earthly sanctuary. 2022 is already the year of vengeance. Second, symbols. By symbols, what symbols? The symbols of the beast. More particularly to the scarlet-colored beast. Figures. What figures? Figurative man. Parables. What parables? The parable of the harvest. Allegories. What allegories? Hosea 1 and 2. Dreams. Nebuchadnezzar dream. vision, all the visions, types, and providences. In that 9 angles, we can prove to you that this is the last year given by God to us. And we are about to enter on that very day. Brothers and sisters, the Day of Atonement. Now, I would like to go back to the reading. On track number 3, on page 56, it says, as his ministry, his sowing of the good seed, the truth began right after his baptism, Matthew 4:17. Therefore, to establish the beginning of the parabolic harvest period, we must ascertain the date he was baptized. What is the divine command? In order for us to ascertain clearly, to establish firmly the parabolic harvest period, we must ascertain clearly the date he was baptized. What date Jesus Christ was baptized? The answer is found in track number 3, page 57. October 16. What day? Friday. What year? 27 AD. Where we could find that? Great Controversy 327. So the two pipes, Sister White and B.T. Hotep, plainly told us that the baptism of Jesus Christ is October 16, 27 AD, Friday. Why is it that the Shepherd's Rod says, if we could ascertain clearly the date he was baptized, then we can firmly establish the parabolic harvest period? No, it is not just to say October 16, 27 AD. Why is it that Sister White already know it, that the baptism of Jesus Christ is October 16, 27 AD? The same with B.T. Hotep. But still, they have no understanding when would be the commencement of the harvest. Because the focal point of the date Jesus Christ was baptized, the date by which Jesus Christ was baptized, is the Bible pattern calendar. And that is pattern number 2. So the baptism of Jesus Christ, what is the fulfillment of that baptism of Jesus Christ? Daniel 9 verse 24, to anoint the most holy. And where is the fulfillment of that event? Isaiah 61 verse 1 and 2. Does the prophetic event fulfilled completely on the first advent of Jesus Christ? No. 1 SR 153. It will repeat itself with the people of God in the time of harvest. And in order to establish the parabolic harvest period, we must ascertain the date he was baptized, pointing to the Bible calendar, pattern number 2, because it is pattern number 2 by which on the second day of the feast, the wave sheep is offered. Why is it that it will be offered? To indicate the commencement of the ingathering of the first fruits. When does the ingathering of the first fruits? Let's read. Again, track number 5. On page 74, it says, in track number 3, the harvest, the time from the baptism of Christ to the close of provision is shown to be illustrated by 12 figurative months. 6 from Christ's baptism to his crucifixion, and 5 from the crucifixion to the ingathering of the first fruits. When would be the ingathering of the first fruits will commence? After the expiration of the 5 symbolical months. And when would be the 144,000 are to be gathered? I would like to read first what does it mean by the word sealed. Let us read 2TG. It says in 2TG number I think number 44, saying the word sealed means the word sealed, 2TG 44:34. The word sealed means placed in a safe place, sealed. So what does it mean by the word sealed? Means placed in a safe place, sealed. So we need to understand what is the safe place. In the parable of Jesus Christ. Let's read track number 8. It says, track number 8, page 92. Inasmuch as both the field with the wheat and tares, Matthew 13:30, and the net with the good and bad fish, Matthew 13, verse 47 and 48, represents the gospel church during the period in which the saints and the hypocrites are commingled. Then the vessels into which the good fish are placed, after the bad are cast away from among them, and the barn into which the wheat is placed after the tares are separated from it, must necessarily represent the church passing from its unclean state, field or net, into another its purified state, which is symbolized not by the field or by the net, but rather by a barn and by vessels, a new place, safe and clean, where henceforth there shall no more come the uncircumcised and the unclean. So in the parable of Jesus Christ, what is the safe place? Vessels and barn. What is the unclean state? Field or net. So, the books in the heavenly sanctuary represented by the field that is unclean. Brothers and sisters, the book or the books represented by the net, that is unclean. But the books represented by vessels and barn, that is a safe place. Meaning, when your name is inscribed into that book, you are forever saved. Vessels and barn. Vessels, that is the books within the holy place. But barn, that is the book in the most holy place. So, brothers and sisters, we need to study closely the interproceedings in the heavenly sanctuary. So, we will continue this subject, brethren, and you can really see that one truth dovetailing another. One truth is contingent upon another. One thing proves another. One thing explains another. Overall, they were in perfect harmony. So, that is how the interplan of redemption is completely revealed. To let us know that all the words of God from the Bible, writings of Sister White and B.T. Hotep, being written with the same spirit of inspiration, the inspiration of the Spirit of Christ, all of them are in perfect harmony, never in contradiction. So there are only two records in the Bible, as explained also by the two golden pipes, concerning the ceremony of the waveship. That is pattern number 6 and pattern number 2. No other that had been ever recorded in the Bible. Pattern number 6 and pattern number 2. What is pattern number 6? The waveship is presented before the Lord on the 4th day of the feast. What is pattern number 2? The waveship is presented before the Lord on the 2nd day of the feast. So we will continue that subject, brothers and sisters. And to repeat again, this year, 2022, is pattern number 2. If this year is not the fulfillment of the prophecy, then we will be saying that it must be in 2029. But no, because that is already the boundary line of the scarlet colored beast, the destruction, brothers and sisters, of the false prophet and the beast cast alive into the lake of fire on that year, the year 2029. Therefore, there is no other year. This is the last remaining year in provisionary time as pattern number 2. There will be no other year to follow, brothers and sisters. Thank you very much for listening and viewing this program. May the good Lord bless you and have a beautiful, wonderful evening.